testing. I'm actually pretty shocked that I'm getting you down here.
Are you in Sheridan right now?
Yeah, we live just south of Sheridan, just right down there by Buck.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I was out there for the cult starting this year. So I've been there
Yeah.
2 years now for that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that clinic he does out there.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, so I did want to ask you what what is it with you saddle maker guys then? Because you know who else is a huge Civil War buff that talks to me about Civil War stuff all the time is Chaz Weldon. Like
Oh, is
like
he?
he'll be texting me like Civil War pictures. Yeah, he actually it was funny you said that he built me a saddle. I guess he finished it in January of this year,
Uh-huh.
and he was like, I was seriously considering like bringing it to you myself because I've always wanted to go to the Shenandoah Valley, which I love the
Yeah. Yeah.
Shenandoah Valley, but I'm like,
Yeah.
man, that seems like a long way. And he was like, oh, I love the Civil War. Like I just want to do an East Coast run where we do like Lexington, Shenandoah Valley, Northern Virginia, and then go up to Gettysburg and do that whole deal. So he loves that
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff. He'll
Yeah, it's
chat
funny. I've
like,
never talked Civil War with Chaz. It's always kind of shop
yeah.
when
Well,
I talk
it,
to Chaz. Well, that's good.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there
No,
must
I
be
don't know.
something.
It's just
Must be something if you're like if you're into saddle making, there might be a similar vein there with the Civil War history.
yeah, right. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's cool. I was there years and years ago in high school, real briefly, but
Okay.
would like to make a trip out of it.
Yeah.
Shenandoah Valley. Yeah, I mean, all right through there. Jackson's campaign. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is gorgeous, and I mean, right now is the time to be there. I mean, it's the horse center there in Lexington, the Virginia Horse Center. It's like up at the top of this hill, kind of in like it's at the bottom of the valley, but you're still in the valley and you just are kind of in a bowl of mountains. And right now with all the leaves changing and stuff, I mean, it's a gorgeous time to be out here. So
I believe it. Yeah, yeah. I just finished a memoirs of a guy by the name of W. Blackford, who was an adjutant, I believe, with Jeb Stewart, and so he goes into more detail on some of the particulars that we would enjoy, the horses and his
mm,
horses, and throughout the war, and so that was a really neat insight. Thinking and reading about what he has to say about his horses, and so that was real neat
yeah,
little addition.
yeah.
So
Isn't it funny? I grew up. My mom, when I was little, she was a dressage trainer, and just had
okay,
been like we had like a library room basically, and half of it was just a bunch of old horse books and like old cavalry books and stuff like that, that she just collected throughout the years. And yeah, all that stuff is so interesting. Um, one like their perspective on horses,
uh huh,
which in a lot of ways is really different. And then some things you're like, oh wow, like there's a certain element of, I guess back in the day, people just spent a lot more time around animals, right? So I feel
yeah,
like your kind of average Joe just had a lot more natural feel
uh huh,
because they just were in proximity more. Um,
yeah,
and then sometimes they write things and you're like, oh yeah, but this is also like some of the people view it as like, this is like how you change the oil in your Chevy, right?
uh huh, yeah, yeah,
Like the way you
right,
use the horses and everything. But
yeah, yeah,
yeah, I love reading that stuff. It's super interesting to me.
yeah, yeah. It's good.
Yeah. They yeah, the first book I think was ever written by like written about horses. Some like Greek guy Xenophon. A lot of
Yeah,
people
yeah,
know him,
Xenophon.
but it's funny. He talks about like bringing along a colt, and I've read that book like cover to cover. I read it in high school, and an integral part of his training program is having like a stable boy work for you, and basically like you halter break that weanling, and then every day that like stable boy like takes that weanling and just like walks all your weanlings through the market square every day. like, and that was like a very integral, like, it was funny he was writing about it, and I was like, man, this is all well and good, but it seems like a lot of these guys back in the day, an integral part of their horse program was just like having a bunch of people work for them that did the work.
Yeah, sack them
And
out, take
then,
them to
and
the market.
yeah, yeah, all that stuff. Yeah, exactly. Cool. So, are you from Sheridan?
No, no, I got here to stay in '97. So I was born and raised in Michigan, and had
Okay.
I have no idea, what the deal was, but ever since I was just a little bitty guy, all I wanted to do was be in the West. So I started going out in high school, 16, and hit Sheridan, met Don Butler, got back, and then didn't really know what I had stumbled into. I was in an apprenticeship there, doing at home at the time, and the guy
An
that I
apprenticeship
was
making
working.
saddles, or
No, I was doing strap work. So
okay, gotcha.
reins and headstalls for a guy by the name of Ron Silverman. And
Okay.
so I,
Now, do you
huh?
feel like that? I was just gonna ask, do you feel like that was kind of a, at the time you were coming up, was that common? Because I feel like I've talked to some guys now, and the apprenticeship thing, to a certain extent, it feels like it doesn't exist quite as much anymore.
For sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed. And that's part of the reason I do the schools.
Hmm.
Even there in the '90s, it was kind of an archaic thing. Guys like Chaz, it was, so they're, he's be a little younger than Butler, but that was still a thing then, and not so much by
Hmm.
the time I came of age, but it was still still there. Um, but no, not anymore. I mean, the shops is just all changed. It's just all entirely different than it was 30 years ago. And so, but
Yeah.
anyway, I walked back in and told Ron where I'd been, what I'd done, who I'd met, and his eyes got really big, and reaches up on the wall there and pulls this
Yeah.
book down,
Can
opens it up, and there's this picture of Butler, and I'm like, whoa, I was in Mecca and didn't even know it, and so that started a journey of discovery of Sheridan and Sheridan style of
mm.
building and the makers and the whole thing. So
So
then,
I would love to hear about that, because I don't know who Don Butler is. So I, like,
oh
can
really?
you explain who Don
Oh,
Butler is?
okay.
Yeah. I mean, I've
All
never
right. So
done
great.
any.
So,
I've
and
punched
this
a
is
couple
part of
holes
the
in a
thing.
yeah. Tell Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So
Explain. Yeah.
the it is funny. These guys they're being forgotten a little bit, and Chaz has the great distinction of being able to live and engage in this world, and yet a lot of the young guys don't even know who Chaz is and his
Hmm.
story and everything. So anyway, Butler, uh, born and raised really in this country, cowboyed all over, and then he stamped. So he was a really good flower stamper, and that was, if you know anything about Sheridan from leather work, it's the flower stamping thing. And so he worked for Ernst, an old saddle company here in town, as a kid in high school. A lot of these ranch kids, and he was no exception. They just have to send you to town to go to high school. So you move to town a lot of times to go to high school. And when he was in high school, he started flower stamping for Ernst. And anyway, fast forward, he's married and has a family, and looking to do something other than cowboy and starve. So he went to work for Bob Douglas, and so I don't know if you know Bob or Bob's story.
No, sir.
Bob worked for King. Sorry, what was that? The audio's kind of cutting in.
Oh, I just said no. I don't know him either. So go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So Douglas is an icon. He's a legend, cowboy legend. Worked for King, apprenticed with King, and then started off in his own deal. And look at some of my own notes on some of the lineage of it all. But I would say it was in the late '60s or early '70s. And then Butler traded a winter's worth of flour stamping to Douglas for Bob to show him how to build a saddle. So my lineage is
Hmm.
Butler, Douglas, King. So that's how you sort of track my pedigree, if you will. And so Butler in the '80s and the
Okay, great.
'90s is at the top of the heap. Really accomplished saddle maker, phenomenal flower stamper, and so I went to work for him in spring of '97. Lose you? You there?
Lose you again? I can hear you. There you are.
You can hear me? Okay. Do you want when
Yeah,
it goes
yeah,
dead
I can.
like that? You want me to just keep talking or?
Yes, please. Yeah, because this will come out a lot better quality than like what we're seeing. It's why
Okay.
we use this particular software. So yeah,
Yeah.
just keep talking. Even if you can't see me, like I'm here and I can hear
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Copy.
Okay. So
So,
you're talking about your pedigree. So
yep.
you worked spring of '97. Don Butler
Yep.
learned from Douglas. Learned from King.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm
Great.
steeped. That's who I am. Complete, total, dyed in the wool. I'm a Sheridan style guy. The
Okay.
that's
Can
my
you
lineage. That's and
let's go
yeah,
into what the Sheridan style is
yeah.
for
So
people.
yeah, you want to think in terms of refinement and detail, and
Hmm.
and so you had, of course, King is the one that probably has the most name recognition, but there was a lot of other guys that had a part in that. So a guy by the name of Lloyd Davis, who virtually nobody knows unless you're a saddle geek, um,
Hmm.
flower stamping geek. You would know who Lloyd Davis. I mean, this guy's work was you know 60 years ahead of his time. I mean, it's just
Hmm.
is phenomenal. The artistry and the detail and the flow and the originality to it is just mind blowing, really. And so you had guys like Lloyd Davis, who had been he would be a little older than King, and so you had him, and of course Rudy Mudra, who King worked for, and um, they he Rudy's not so much the flower stamping, but the mechanics of it, and again, the attention to detail at a high level. So, anyway, you had a perfect storm, if you will, of guys all up and down Main Street. You had saddle makers and shops. And so in those days, it maybe wasn't as friendly as what it became in the '80s. It was more of a, fierce competition. Times were
Hmm.
different. People actually used saddles
Yeah.
as, and so knowledge, how you did something, that was all secretive. And
Hmm.
so in Ernst and all that, it created a culture and a world that was completely unique. And so you have that next generation, so like Butler and Clint Fay and Jim Jackson, Billy Gardner, all of these other guys that grew up here that I mean, that's what they knew. It was natural. It was just like breathing, it was just how you did it. And so then it snowballed and, and I really think that probably the golden age of it was probably in the '80s. So you had, uh, guys like the ones I just mentioned and Chester Hape, who were all they had hit the top of their game King's still stamping, Hape is going crazy, Jim Jackson's there involved, Butler's involved, Clint Fay is there, all Billy Gardner's still going. You have all of these high end stampers, and it's just really, really unique. There's no internet. You can't Google anything. If you want to see it, you have to come here. So it's isolated. So it's this enclave
Hmm.
of incredible talent, and it's here. It's only here, and so you have to come here in order to learn anything if you can. And still, there's a lot of secretive stuff going on. I worked for Butler for 3 years before, he started to show me anything about building a saddle. So that it, you couldn't just click anything. There's no schools. There just isn't much going on as far
Yeah.
as that. But anyway, all of those guys are operating high level in the
Yeah.
Indies there.
You think there was a reason Sheridan became that place? Like,
Yeah, when I was talking with Douglas, Douglas is late 80s, and he's a mentor, and so I'll still go talk to him. It's like going to Yoda, it's like he's the guy, and what also makes him really unique is he left home at 13 to cowboy, so he comes from an age where it was a tool. The horse was a tool. The saddle was a tool, and so it's a whole different mentality that is being lost because people they're just dying, and we don't use these animals and these saddles and stuff the way that our ancestors did.
mm-hmm.
But when talking with him about it, he really highlights the dude ranches. So we had a lot of dude ranches around.
Okay.
This was a high value. Uh, is still today. A lot of wealth is in this area because this is
Yep.
an incredibly beautiful area, and so you can always make money in the real estate here. And
Mm-hmm.
so dude ranches were a big thing. So people would come. And of course, there was not really the factory mentality yet with saddle making. So these dude ranches had a huge demand, so they needed saddles, and you had all of these shops that were doing that. And then the dudes themselves would order saddles and have them just there for them. So when they would show up on an annual basis, they would have their saddles. So some of that just drove the demand. And then it's like anything else, it just, once it gets started, then it's, good old American capitalism at work, and, things
Yeah.
just take a life of their own. And then boom, that people are pursuing their God-given talent and economic pursuits, and it just really blossoms into
Yeah.
this really unique thing.
Well, and like you said, the saddle, at the start of that, the saddle is a tool, but I feel like and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like part of the custom saddle making now, there's definitely still a lot of people that get saddles and they're going to put them to work, whether they ride for the public or cowboy or do whatever. But there's also a lot of people who just like want a really, really nice saddle and maybe like
Yep.
go ride their horse once a week. Right. And
Yep.
so say you're one of those people, well, you go to Sheridan for the dude ranch for the week, and then you're like, gosh darn it, I got to be a cowboy on the weekends now. Right. And then, you go into town for dinner and there's all these saddle shops and all that stuff. So I could see where that would feed
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah.
And so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And so, it, I would say that's a very good rationale for it. And then, of course, you had local demand
Yep.
in ranches, and it wasn't really until 20 years ago, say, that people started doing the whole side by side and four wheeler thing. So even if you have 100 head of cows and a little bitty place, and you're you got to move things around. You know, you're still doing it horseback, and you need a saddle, and so uh,
Yeah.
you know, there's still a
So
lot of local demand. There
that's
was a
another.
lot of
I'm glad
local
you brought
demand.
that up. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up though, because so has there been a change? Obviously, there has there been a change in pricing on the custom saddles and versus like a saddle shop and things like that? Because let's say today there's a guy in that scenario, right, where he's like, I got 100 cows, um, and I want to, I want to kind of do it the old style. I'm going to have a horse, do all that, but they're not necessarily going to go drop like $6,500 on like a custom saddle. I mean, they might, but you know what I mean? Like I feel like that other demographic potentially drives that up. But again, I don't know how the marketplace works for that. But and maybe the Cowboys are just willing to spend that now. But is there any element of that, like as the saddles have gotten more and more custom and guys are doing one man shops and doing everything, like the customer base has changed, or like the customer base maybe
Sure.
caused that to change, one or the other?
Yeah, it varies. I try to keep some. I mean, personally, um, you know, there's a whole number of things that go into pricing, but I try not to
Oh,
lose
yeah.
track of
Yeah.
the
No, I and
historic.
and and I think I was just going to say I think saddle makers should 100% charge what they're worth, right? I'm not saying that I think saddles are
No,
too
no, no.
high or
I'm with
anything
you.
like that. But that is that is part of it. I mean, just on materials alone, like I've seen that in like the last 5 years, how you
Yeah,
guys get killed on leather and hardware and stuff
yeah.
like that. It's completely changed.
Yeah, yeah. And so, yeah, in the last few years, it'd be
Yeah.
hard to maybe keep the historic 3 months wages for a saddle. You know, that's kind of an old rule of thumb that, you know, punchers
Okay.
spend, say, 3 months wages on a saddle. And so
Mhm.
we're still, you know, my saddles are still in that ballpark. And in wages are, you know, all of it is just askew for the last number of years after, you know, COVID and inflation and everything. But um,
Mhm.
there is a little of that. So, you know, you do have a handful of guys, I think, that are stronger to the collector in, and that might skew it some, but you know, by and large, I'm pretty comfortable. I think where it is as a, you know, an industry. You know, I
Okay.
think um, you know, a lot of punchers are in that two. You know, depending on, you know, any number of things, right? But
Mhm.
that whole world has gotten crazy. But you know, they're in their neighborhood of 2,500 to 3,500, and you multiply that times three, and you're
Mhm.
getting, you know, that's about where we're at.
Yeah.
So it's you know, comparatively it's close.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I had never heard the three months wages for a saddle. That
Yeah,
yeah. But
yeah,
there's like things like that in a lot of like uh my dad, I grew up with my dad. We'd have a bull sale every spring and he'd always want to average at the sale the cost of 3 wiener calves
yep,
for the price of a bull and things like
yep,
that. Yeah.
yep,
So that makes sense.
yeah. So you know, and then I try to, you know, on that whole topic of, I guess, you know, cost, I mean, you obviously got to have you got to know how many hours you have in it and what your costs are. And of course, that stuff has been, uh, it just is what it is.
Mhm.
You know, beef cattle are more,
Yeah. No,
hides are more,
everything's more.
labor's more, shipping's more. Shipping is outrageous, you know. So,
Yeah.
you know, now what I'm building a saddle for is, you know, even just 15 years ago, you could about build two.
Mhm.
So, you know, it's about doubled. So, you know,
Yeah.
everybody's in the same boat, though. It's
Yeah.
not saddle
Yeah.
makers by themselves.
Right,
We're all in it.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it makes sense to have that because the numbers are going to go up, right? The numbers have been
Yeah.
going up like since any of us have been alive now.
Right.
Um, so having that idea of the relativity kind of helps keep things in check,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
this should be equivalent to three of this or whatever. That's um, I think that helps because the numbers are going to go up. So you can't just look back like, well, 5 years ago it would have been
Yeah. Yeah.
this, and it's like, yeah, well, 5 years
Yeah.
ago milk and eggs would have been this, and yada yada
Yeah.
yada. Um,
Yeah. There's.
so okay, so
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to get back to spring of '97.
Yeah. Right. Spring of '97. Yeah. Yeah. A
Yeah.
long time
So
ago. So
so you were already on the leather work train. Did you know you wanted to make saddles, or were you just like like how did you get involved leatherworking at all?
yeah.
How'd you know you want to do something like that?
Yeah. So for me, uh, I don't know how much detail you want. Most people like to hear the stories, but so as
Yeah,
a
go for it.
kid, yeah, as a kid, the horse, right? It's always been about the horse, and still is always about the horse for me. And so, I have a crazy story. No, it's nobody in my family anything like me. Tease, that I came from, certainly some other planet because there's uh, nothing is like this. It's a total anomaly for my family. Anyway, my mom, when I suppose, about 9, introduced me to a guy by the name of Will James in a bookstore. And he just absolutely ruined me. I read everything. I've collected his books. I started collecting his books then, and I was just, this is it. This is what I want to do. And you know, ride bad horses, rope wild cattle, and do the deal. And so there was a guy in my life. He was a horseshoer. He shod my horses and took me under his wing. He's a great man. Uh, he took this little 12, 13-year-old kid under his wing. I grew up, I rode 100 jumpers, and he was a man's man. He could build anything, fix anything, ride anything, and good Christian man. And he took me under his wing and taught me a lot about life, taught me a lot about horses. He's forgot more about horses than most people ever will learn. And uh, he played around with little leathers, and he had this shop, and he'd build a few things. And I was reading this book, this Will James book, and in that book, Sand, the heroine in the story, she turns this steer. She's got this set of taps. She flings her taps up, and for whatever reason, I just, I mean, I had to have a set of taps, and so I tell Gary this, and I said, "Man, this is what I want. Can you help me build a set of these things?" And, oh yeah, you bet. And so we go down to whatever the local Tandy leather store and get some leather and some stuff, and we go to his little blacksmith shop and we hack these things out. I've got them laying around somewhere, and I mean they are wretched. I mean, it's just a hack job deluxe, and so I'm hooked though, right? Doing leather. I'm going to be like Will James, and I hang him on my saddle and I'm riding around. And so then I just start building whatever I can, little chunks of whatever I can find. And in my 4-H club, there's this guy, Ron Silverman. This is a guy who I went to work for as soon as I got my driver's license. And he did leather work and built wholesale leather goods for like Sheet Brothers and stuff back there. Had his own line of work, and so he would help me some. And then when I went to work for him, he taught me how to hold an edge and all of that. And so yeah, I mean by 13, 14, that's I was starting to get hooked pretty heavy, and you have to bear in mind nobody, my parents, God bless them, and they had no idea what to do with this kid, and it's all he wants to do, and they didn't know anything. It's not. I mean, there is zero knowledge about any of this, and so they did a great job just trying to uh, allow me to pursue these things, and so with the help of guys like Gary and Ron, and you just stumble along, and then I discovered Sheridan, and 18, got done with high school, and went to work for Butler, and then I'd get green grass fever, and then started cowboying, and I have a second family. Yeah, it's a cool story, and it's real answered prayer and everything. That shortly after I moved here, because I didn't know anybody, I just kind of moved here cold turkey,
Mm-hmm.
and they've got a little ranch, and it's like I became their son, and so we leased that ranch and have for years, and so so was there, and then started cowboying and stuff. So
So how? So you're 18 and 97, come out,
yeah,
and how long were you in the shop before you go out to cowboy?
I left. Let's see here, the spring of '99, and then would the summers, spring and summers, like '99, 2000, and '01, I went to work for a rein and horse trainer, and '02, I think I was still back. I went back to the shop, and then I met a little blonde that sort of changed things a little bit, and we got married in
Mm.
'03. Yeah. So then you're settling
Okay.
down more, but we still I still well, and have for years. We're, of course, have the ranch, and so I'm out there doing the thing, and then spring and fall we're like this month, there this year is 2 months. I'm branding for big ranches and stuff. So, and then the
Cool.
horse deal,
Cool.
all along that same time as I'm pursuing the leather work, I'm pursuing the horse training thing, and and then that's part of the story with here in the north. The emphasis in this part of the world was the rough string rider, right? I mean, the guy that started all the horses, he was King Kong. So there was still
Mm-hmm.
some of that mentality with that generation that was older than me, that would have been like Don's age, and certainly King's age, and Butler, or excuse me, Douglas, was the guy that rode the young horses, was looked up to, had a lot of respect. So I started, you know,
Mm.
right off the bat, started messing and fooling with colts, and then pretty quick, people are sending them to you, and then that's my side gig, and then it became 50-50. So I would, I'd be, particularly after I left the apprenticeship, then it would be 50-50. So I'd ride colts. As soon as the weather would start to break, people would start sending me horses. So even in March, they'd start trickling in, and then you'd be rolling. So we'd start in 5 to 6 month window. We'd roll through. We'd average pretty easy 60 head, 30-day, start jobs. So did
Okay.
that, and then we started going all over. I traveled, so went to Kentucky and Tennessee and South Carolina and Texas. Starting horses. Polo's a big deal here, so I started
Mm-hmm.
gobs and gobs of polo horses. So big part of my clientele, the biggest part, probably 70% of them
Okay.
are polo people.
That's not a bad clientele though. I like the polo horses that I've started.
Yeah, yeah, they're good. They're good, and they're horsemen. and they ride, which is
Mm-hmm.
super helpful.
Yeah.
So you have they
Yeah.
have
Don't have to worry about what they're going to do with him when he goes
yeah,
back home.
yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah. Cool.
but
Well,
yeah,
that honestly, that sounds great. I mean, here in Virginia, um, I, I I work about 10 months out of the year riding horses. And then December and January, um, I pretty much just do other stuff. I don't take any outside horses. Just do some other things. Kind of like day work for people, and then um, feeding here. We've got a handful of cattle. Me and my wife do, so taking care of them and really just kind of like fixing everything and gearing back up for like the
yeah,
10-month pull where we do have stuff. But I you know I like where I live, but I could see where it would almost be a nice balance where you kind of get into like seasons of life, right? Where you're
yeah,
like,
right,
now we're just riding the horses. And then,
yep,
I mean, it's just because I'm sitting in a leather shop every day is so much different. Like those are so different kind of physically and mentally, I would
hmm,
imagine. So
yeah.
that sounds like a really good balance you were able to strike, kind of early on in your life too.
Yeah, it's life has always been for me about trying to integrate it, and like I said, the horse has
Hmm.
been the focal point. That's what really got me interested in the leather work and the saddles and everything. It's always been about the horse and the
Hmm.
of course training,
Yeah.
um,
Well,
predominant
I
predominant.
noticed I was looking on your website. It says Paul VanDyke saddlery and stock horses, but
Yeah,
the and stock horses part is in like 6 times bigger than the saddlery part,
yeah,
like the way the logo's laid out.
right,
So I was like, he
yeah,
must really care about that stock horse part because that's the
yeah.
biggest part of the logo right there.
Right. Yeah, it is a big deal to me, and now my girls are 15 and 16, and so they've been right there with me
Oh,
ever since
great.
they, of course, they could walk really and ride, and so it's just a lot of fun now. And I'm not taking outside horses. I haven't for this will be the second year, and so we have our own deal and build a few and sell a few and show a few. It's great. It's a good deal. Try to be done in the shop and certainly by mid afternoon, and then we're training and riding or uh, moving cows or something. Yeah. So
Yeah. Well, great. So you get married in 2003. By that time, had you kind of struck this balance of, I, I guess, when did you make your first saddle?
yeah, it would have been what was it? I believe it was 2000. It was 2000. So it was
Okay.
probably right before I left for the spring wagon. Would have been when I built it, I think. Yeah. It's been right in
Okay.
there.
Now, was that like you were independent or as part of a shop,
No.
or how did that
Yes.
work?
Yeah, you mean like how that first saddle went?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you still
No, he
working for Don?
yeah. I left there in 4. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I built probably I think it is like 50 saddles for Don
Okay.
during those 4 years. And like I said, I mean, some of it was, I was gone, so I was there 7 years, but it wasn't like I was there that whole duration of time. There had been big chunks of it while I was off, doing the cowboy thing or the horse training thing or something. Um, but no, in that
Hmm.
first saddle, he is kind of 50-50 deal where he how he'd like to think about it, and he'd talk about is I'm going to build one side of it and you'll build the other. So um,
Okay.
yeah,
That's a
that
good
would have
way
been
to do
in
it.
2000. So yeah.
And at that time, was there kind of like a style of saddle you were predominantly making? Like, was this
Yeah,
Wades
the
were all the
Wade
rage, like
craze,
the
man.
classic Ray Hunt Wade at this point?
Oh yeah, it's
Yeah,
still, yeah, it was just still going crazy. And to uh I mean it was still up into, I don't know, 15 years ago, I suppose, is when the uh the swell fork started coming back, or being
yeah.
rediscovered
To
maybe.
me, yeah, I was gonna say, to me, I feel like the swell forks have come back like the last like maybe 7, 8 years. And
Okay.
again, I'm not a saddle maker, so you would know.
Right.
But like, yeah, I agree with you though. I've
Yeah.
had conversations with other makers about that the swell fork is like making a comeback. Where that early 2000s era, it was everything was a Wade, right? Like
Oh yeah.
everyone wanted Wades all the time. Yeah,
Yeah, everybody did. Yeah, and that's about all I built. I probably
yeah.
in that 4 year period of time working for Don. I mean, gosh, you could, of those 50 saddles that I built working for, I don't know, maybe five swell forks.
Hmm.
There's just tremendous amount
Yeah.
of slick forks, and and a lot of that was yeah, I mean, it was the Ray Hunt deal, Dorances and Gray and of course Buck and all of that whole genre.
Hmm. Well, that was also when, I mean, you saw it. I felt like you saw it everywhere. Like the horse expos were really big, and it was always like you said, it was like the Dorances and Ray Hunt and Buck and Pirelli and all these other guys that were kind of riding the natural horsemanship
Yeah,
wave, if you want
right,
to call it that.
right, right,
Um,
right.
and like part of part of fitting in was having a big old horn on a slick fork saddle, and then that's how
Oh,
you like fit in, right? So
right. Yeah, it was funny. I had a friend come by
yeah,
a year ago, and there was a saddle in here, and it was the '90s, early 2000 vintage looking saddle, and it was a guy that my age. That's when we came of age, was in the '90s, and he grins and he looks at that saddle and he looked at me and he said, "You can always tell when what era a guy came up in by looking at a saddle, because that's what they thought cool was." And that's
yeah,
what we thought cool was then, was that the weight and the big horn, and it was just, I built gobs of them, and now it's a little Llewellyn with a little Keach horn and square skirts. That's the deal. So, or a TM or something, and they're great.
yeah,
They look great. They ride good. They feel good, and I for doing anything outside of cowboying, yeah, they're awesome.
yeah. No, I've got several, and I love them. I love them absolutely. I agree with you, but yeah, I've heard the joke like everyone always loves like whatever music was popular when they started driving.
Yeah, right.
Right. That's what they feel like is the best music.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a
So
good way of putting it.
cool. Um, so you get about 50 saddles under your belt. Can you talk
Yep.
about the decision to go out on your own? And was part of that like the marriage and just becoming more independent and stuff like
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, there's a lot of that. You were talking earlier about seasons, and so there are certain seasons of the journey for all of us that are, they're similar. And you start hitting that age, so I'm like mid-20s or whatever, and and I'm wanting to pursue the horse thing more. And Don is, it's not like they're sort of on the other end. It's like they're not wanting to go crazy and pursue things, and I'm younger and wanting to do it. And there's there's a lot of that independence, and you want to have you want it to be yours and your name and your brand and your
Mm.
dream. And so it was pretty natural transition there, and that's part of the dream. Really, is doing it for yourself, and having VanDyke saddlery, and that was you know, yeah, part of the dream. And
Yeah.
so um, how that looked was uh, you just don't wake up one day and have 15, 20 saddles on order, 30 head of colts coming to you, so it's a work in progress. Douglas told
Yeah.
me 20 years ago, he said, Paul, every overnight success took 20 years. And I remembered that, and here it is. This is 20 years this year, and here we are. We're still here and still doing everything you love, and waking up's great, and getting to work's great. Got great customers, and life is good. But so how that looked was. In the day, again, it's really a different age. So you don't just click on the computer and find the saddle. You got to go places to get them. And so Brighton Feed and Bozeman Saddle Outlet
Mhm.
were big in my life. They would buy my saddles, and then they'd sell them. So I'd wholesale Paul VanDyke saddles to those guys, and did that for a number of years. Bozeman Saddle Outlet there, Don Adamack in Bozeman, Montana, was Paul VanDyke's biggest fan for years, and it was great. We all need to have a fan, and he was mine,
Oh yeah.
and so it was a big boost, because that guy could sell ice to Eskimos, and he'd sell my saddles, and it was great. And then I also went to work I built saddles for Capriolas and Big Bend and Hamleys. So that was really good, because those are all different looks.
Mm.
A
Hmm.
Hamley deal is different than a Big Bend, and that's different than a Capriolas, and that's a struggle. Trying to take what you have been taught, and by then 50 saddles in, you're starting to 100 saddles in, you're starting to create a little bit of who you are, and discovering what you like and what you don't like, and some of your lines and the process, and um, so that was really good for Paul to have people from different parts of the world that had different ideas say, no, I don't like it like this. I want you to do this. And okay, so it was good. It was a good tool. It taught me a lot, kept me busy. And so, combination of building those spec saddles, a handful of custom saddles, and then working for those other guys was, I don't know, probably 6 years or something like that. And then I was competing. I'd take saddles to some of these shows, those early shows, and that was really good too. So you get outside of the area that you're in, sort of your pond or your pool, and I'd go to Texas and Wichita Falls. There was a big show there, and so you've got guys from there, and then from all over the country coming there. So you're looking at your work and meeting other makers and seeing how they do things. So that was also really good. So those next 6 years to probably 10, 11, somewhere in there, was doing the spec saddles and working for some of those other guys, doing contract work, and about once a year, maybe go do some of those shows, compete, and then that all started tapering off. The horse deal by then was going strong,
Yeah.
and
Can I ask you a question
yeah,
about those saddle shows?
yeah.
Um, So is that, I'm kind of looking at it through the eyes of, maybe you're a horse trainer, maybe you're a guy in like the show deal, right? Like taking the time to build that show saddle, would you take it and then would you sell it after? Or is it one of those things where like you kind of have to carve out time and like spend
Yeah,
time that's not necessarily like profit earning time to make
yeah,
this show saddle, but then obviously you felt like the shows really helped develop you. Can you, like, is
yeah.
that something you felt like was
That's a
inherent or did
good
you have to think
question.
about that?
Yep, that's a good question, and by and large, that's the reason I quit doing it. So
Okay.
the I would do, there early on, of course, you're doing contract work or whatever, so it's not like you're going to take a capriola set, because you're wanting to build your name, build your brand, whatever. And so I built saddles for just myself, I guess, eat the time, eat the labor,
Mm-hmm.
and then would try to sell them, and did. It's funny we're even talking about this because my daughter, I built one, I think it was an '07, and then I just stuck it in the basement, really. And it lived there, it was in a couple art galleries for a little while. So anyway, my daughter is like 3 years old or something at the time, and she goes down into this basement and uncovers this saddle down there and just lays claim to it and says, "That's my saddle." And of course, I mean, she's a little bitty thing, and it's her saddle, and she rides it every every day. It
Nice.
has, yeah. So I had to, you know, tweak the fenders a little bit, but anyhow, I would build those and sell them, with the exception of that one. That one is in the barn here, but um, it yeah, it's tough. You don't want, if you want to win, which I do. I'm a competitive guy, and so you want to win, and so to take the time to build in today's dollars, a 15 or 18, $20,000 saddle, to win even $1,000 is just, I mean, the math is just ridiculous, of course. And so, I tried to build, at those later shows, you would try to take something that you had an order for, but, the order isn't equal to the task of maybe winning it or something, so you have to weigh those
Sure.
things. So early on, yes, I'd just eat it and go, and then tried to have a saddle that would be, fancy enough that you wouldn't be embarrassed to take the thing, or you wouldn't have to eat so much. But it was hard to justify it, so I didn't. I haven't. I just didn't keep doing it. And really, the public, I've never had a customer uh, be interested in it. I've never had a customer, to my knowledge, discover me. Of course, now it's getting to be uh, years ago, but people are more concerned about the fact that I ride and I'm more accomplished with that than I am, showing saddles and competitions. And
Mm-hmm.
so that, yeah, people care way more about the fact that, I use the things in real life situations than any of that
Sure.
other stuff. But nonetheless, it was a great
Yeah.
experience,
So
and yeah,
I was just gonna say that that kind of led me to another question I wanted to cover at some point. Because I've heard makers talk about, apparently this is a debate, and this isn't just, I don't mean saddle makers, I mean kind of all the like traditional cowboy stuff, like bits and spur guys, um, braiders, whatever. You feel like to be a good maker, you have to have cowboyed or ridden for the public, or basically made your living in a saddle or using that equipment at some point.
right, right. That's the million. Well, I don't know if it's $1 million, but it's a debate, and I'm fairly libertarian, right? So like I'm pretty easy guy to get along, whatever. uh,
Hmm.
but yeah, I mean, if you had a gun to my head and I was forced, I'd say, yeah, I think it makes a difference. It makes a difference if um,
Hmm.
you're out there by yourself and you got a doctor or something and you know how to tie off and your horse is working rope, your saddle's working for you. And I think all of that makes a difference when you're building it, how you cover a horn, the little nuances to that uh, from a guy who uh, knows what it's like to be overmatched. You got a bigger cow on the end than what maybe your horse is prepared to handle, and or any of those things that uh, all of those experiences that go into the story that the saddle carries. And so I think it does. The
Hmm.
seat, of course, and the lines and the look and all of that. I think it plays an issue, or it's got something there. And we were talking history earlier, and about people that have proximity to horses, even if they had no love of the horse. Okay, in 1900, they didn't even like the
Hmm.
horse, perhaps, but they had a basic understanding and a working knowledge of how to get along with him because they were forced to, and in a lot of ways, I think that's in somewhat applicable. That if you're using that thing, if you're getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning and saddling him and going down the road and dragging calves and gathering and shipping and weaning and doing the deal, and then you're going to the arena and your horses will stop and they turn around, they go to a cow. And I think that all that knowledge and all of that feel does come out in your work. I just don't know how it couldn't, and I do think that it's a benefit. But that being said, history. You go back in a lot of those old makers, those good old makers. I mean, they didn't really ride.
Hmm.
They were mechanics. That was
Yeah.
an old word for saddle makers. They were a mechanic,
Yeah.
and
I mean, yeah, they like lived in town and like wore ties to work and stuff.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. And so you don't want to be so tunnel visioned in your thing. Like, I mean, that's who I am, and that's part of how I brand myself. And I would like people to think about me as this is a guy who does fine work and builds good horses.
Hmm.
That he knows how to build a good horse, and when I'm showing or when I'm out with my buddies, and I'm just one of the guys on the crew. I'm in one of my saddles, and for me, it's about some of the brand, but that's also just that's how I want to live. That's who I am.
Sure.
That's what I want, and that's a big deal to me. A big sense of accomplishment and satisfaction is building my own horse and having him be a nice one, a good one, and having a really nice saddle. So I think that it's positive. I think it's a good thing, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you don't have to. No.
Yeah. Well, and it might be one of those things where it's a little more nuanced than that, and it's like how kind of like you take a colt, right? And it's like how do you take this colt and then like turn them into being the best bridle horse that colt can be,
Right.
right? Okay, well, how do you take this like 18-year-old or this apprentice or whatever? And I'm like, now we turn him into the best saddle maker he can be. It might not be the exact same path for both those
Yeah.
people, right? Because some guys might have to like you said, there's so much value in being out there and doing it and understanding the function and having that feel to it. But then other guys, like they might be less of the artist and more of the engineer, and they've got to be in the shop every day, and they're getting feedback and they're cranking them all like out, like, in the middle of July, still going. And so, like, maybe that's the best way to go about having that person be the best saddle
Sure.
maker they can be.
Yeah.
So,
There's, we're all on our journey, and we all
yeah,
have our. Is for some people, they just. Uh, I mean, it's impossible, right? I
yeah,
mean, not everybody is going to have a little family ranch that they can, that they're running and they're managing, and not everybody has the ability to go day work for a ranch that's 500,000 acres. That's just
hmm,
it's actually the rare person, the rare
hmm,
maker that would have that opportunity, and so you don't want to create a box when you don't need to, but I think it helps, and
yeah,
it's
makes sense.
certainly how I wanted to be. Those guys that I'm in the line of. So Butler, I mean, he cowboyed big ranches, big outfit cowboy. Of course, Douglas, same deal, um, and Bob was way ahead of his time. He was one of those first guys that did all of that and had a shop at his house. He had a little, still does have has a little shop there at his house, and so, when you're 18, uh, and we're looking at people to pattern your life after. He was one of those guys, and that really had a lot of appeal to me. Having your shop right there and your horses standing around, and that's what I wanted. Not everybody's got that ability or maybe that dream, but that was mine.
Yeah. So, um, I want to kind of keep moving in the
Yeah,
story. I guess the other part of this, like you said, you're not just all of a sudden you have a ton of saddle orders and you have a ton of colts lined up. Um, but you do get to the point where you can make the jump. Mentioned you're fortunate with the family ranch you could work out of from the horse perspective. Um, if you're gonna, what kind of overhead does it look like? Like, education aside, say today I get a wild hair and I'm like, I'm gonna go set up my saddle shop, and McDonald's Saddlery is open for business. What kind of overhead am I looking at from like a workspace and tools? And does it take a minute to get that together before you go out on your own, or is that something you can kind of put together fairly
yeah,
quickly from
yeah,
like a
right.
young guy starting out perspective?
Yeah, so I have this conversation a lot actually because I help a lot of people, and just had a young man with me this week and doing some flower stamping, and the schools will get kicked off here in November on a pretty regular basis, and so then I have that conversation with virtually everybody that comes through. And so it, a basic set of hand tools is you're going to be able to get into that for probably 1800, and then the machines and all of the other stuff. It's you can get a decent shop put together for probably 8 to 10,000 with. Sorry, I got all these flies. But anyway, so you're looking at probably 8 to 10 there, and then you're just it depends on your what shop space you want to have. This shop here has been the result of years, of course, of trying to put a couple nickels together, and we've been really blessed and fortunate, and we were able to buy this place and build this shop, and it's been fantastic. But I've worked out of a closet. A little
Hmm.
tiny mudroom closet thing, and I've got a splitter in a barn and a bench in a basement, and you're all over the place. And so necessity, right, is mother of
Yeah.
all invention, and so you just got to do what you got to do. Yeah, you can put a shop in a pretty small area. That one shop I was there for, we were there in that little place for 6 years, and I think my main area was at most 10 by 10. And so you're just really, really in a small spot. So it doesn't
Hmm.
take huge area,
Hmm.
room for a little bench and saddle stand.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Cool. So 2004, you strike out on your own. Um, and I mean, it sounds like in a lot of ways you're kind of doing very similar to what you were doing back then.
Yep.
Um,
Oh yeah.
as far as the horse programs going, has it pretty much always been like the colt starting, or like I know you mentioned the horse show deal.
Yep.
Was that something? Was that something for money, or was that like a you thing or your daughters? Like,
Yeah.
when did the
That
showing
was a me
start?
thing.
Okay, when did
Yeah.
the
The
showing
show.
start?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. I suppose I was 30, and refinement is always the artisan mentality. And so,
Hmm.
depending on how you were talking about dressage and history and stuff. And so for centuries, horsemanship, of course, was viewed as an art form. It wasn't a recreation necessarily. It was how we traveled, and then it was this art form. And so that is, really, how I view it too. Is it's an art form and the feel and all of that. And so the showing was a way of trying to up the game, learn more. And how do you there's a bridle horse, and then there's a bridle horse, right? So you can,
Hmm.
people, or any kind of a horse, so people can, they can have a really nice beast, and let's say you can go doctor on him, but this thing will only go in the left lead, right? Right. And a lot of times they don't even know that they're only in the left lead. They'll be loping around and going to the right, and they might have a $10,000 saddle, a $4,000 spade bit, and whatever, and have no idea. And I'm not demeaning any of that. I'm just saying there are these different, wide ranging uh, pursuits with horses. And so for me, the pursuit is about uh, refinement, and really more of an art. I want my saddles to be beautiful. I want my horses to be beautiful, and and uh, and of course, not every animal is capable
Hmm.
of riding around in a spade bit and being able to do tempies and then go work a cow and uh, go down the fence and then tie off to that cow. And it's a pretty small percentage of horses that are capable of that. And that's kind of where that's always the pull, is to try to be an elite level of the areas in life that are they call to me. It's my day doesn't feel right unless I'm schooling a horse and training and trying to get to that next level of horsemanship, or get my horses to that next level of broke and beautiful.
Hmm.
And same thing with my saddles. I just never ever want to be not striving for
Hmm.
the next step of perfection. So for me, the showing, it's maybe long-winded. It's about refinement. It's about pushing myself. It's about pursuit, always be in pursuit. And so,
Yeah.
we play at it. Really, it's not like I'm going down the road or anything. But in the last year or two, we're fortunate enough now to where we've got some horses that are more capable of doing what I want, and my kids are at an age where they can do it, and financially you can maybe afford to do it a little bit more. And so
Hmm.
been blessed, and we this fall we've hit it pretty good, and had a good run with it. And so um, it's good. But it was about the pursuit of the art of it, really, the
Yeah.
pursuit of the yeah.
Well, it's cool you say that actually. So I'm actually feel like I'm going through a similar situation right now. Um, I just got married back in September. Um,
Well, congrats.
and I'll be 30. Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I'll be 30 in the spring.
Yeah.
But my sister-in-law, she has an APHA mare that
Uh-huh.
she doesn't really need, but she wants me to take it and show it for the next year or two, and then kind of find a landing spot for this horse. Um, so I grew up horse showing, but like I grew up like 3 day eventing,
Yeah.
dressage and pony club and stuff like that.
Yep.
So I'm not like the horse show thing isn't completely new to me, but in terms of like the stock horse and the cow horse deal,
Yeah.
that is a new thing to me. So next year, um, I'm gonna start showing, and it has really, kind of gotten my gears turning about that sort of stuff because I'm always trying to make my horses as nice as they can be and like be able to, uh, like you said, be refined and be able to do a job and stuff. But my day to day is basically colt starting. It
Yep.
pretty much is, starting whatever in my neck of the woods. And because of my wife's work, it's a lot of starting hunter jumpers and everything. But
Yep.
now that I know I'm going to go show, every ride, I'm thinking about like, oh, well, this is not, oh, that felt good. It's like, no, this is the image I have in my head now. And I feel like the pending show pin in a good way has given me just a lot more incentive to think about how I want my horses to look than
Yeah.
I've ever had since I
Yeah.
kind of started doing this for a living, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
I'm very interested to see how that goes because I'm kind of in a little bit of a parallel, like kind of same point in life, um, and like been starting colts and getting into the show ring for
Yep.
the first time, at least in the cow horse deal. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
I can
it's
appreciate that because my brain has
yeah.
started turning ever since I got a hold of this mare. Like, oh, this is what it needs to look like.
Yeah. And there's nothing like putting yourself out to expose your life to your flaws. So showing will
Mm-hmm.
do that. For me, as I'd mentioned earlier, I'm competitive and all of that, and of course you want to win. But really the 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 biggest thing that you take away from it is it reveals to you what you have. It's it it's a more accurate thermometer of who you are and who your horse is, because you can go around and you think, man, I'm awesome, actually. I'm look at this thing. I mean, hey,
Mm-hmm.
babe, video me. Like I look sweet. And I'm a cool guy. And then, you go to the show and you know, there's a lot of talented people in this world riding horses. And you got to go throw your hat in the ring and you're saying, "Hey, I think I can do it." And it'll say, "Well, maybe, but not today." And this is why. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, your horse runs around upside down and doesn't stop all that good. And didn't even know there
Mm-hmm.
was a cow in the county when we put that one in the arena with you. And so it is a really revealing thing, and it reveals a lot also about yourself, your own flaws, just as a human. I think about, can you have a really bad experience? Because we all have. I mean, I've,
Mm-hmm.
I've, I tell people I'm the warning label. That's why they put warning labels on things, is because some idiot did it, and that's me. I'm the guy that, I've done it all wrong. So can you have a bad experience and come back and keep trying? Can you get better? Can you improve? And be open to seeing your flaws and your horse's flaws. People and their horses and their dogs, they're just a lot of times just not open to uh, change. Frankly, they're not
Mm-hmm.
willing to say, yeah, you're right, and I need to do something about that. So it's
Mm-hmm.
good because it reveals the flaws for me, in myself and in my training, and so that's one of the reasons I do it.
Yeah, that's cool. I think it's good to have that perspective on it. Um, so you've kind of built this up. You obviously you're trying to progress what you already have, but now you're much more defined.
Yeah,
What would you say if someone got on the phone today and said, I want one of your saddles, but can you talk about your style and what makes you different? Like if someone has a Paul VanDyke saddle, how would you know it's a Paul VanDyke saddle? Can you talk
sure.
about kind of
Yeah.
your what you feel like
Well,
is
of
your
course,
identity as a saddle maker now?
yeah, some of it's the lines, right? So, the look. Saddles are a little bit like livestock in the sense that if you're breeding cattle or you're breeding dogs or you're breeding horses, you're after a look. So, if you're breeding corgis, right, you don't want that corgi to look like a Labrador. So you're going to run out of
Mm-hmm.
customers really quick if that's the kind of if we are corgis and your corgis look like Labradors, then it's just not going to work. So there's a certain look that you have that is recognizable. Uh, and granted, that may be you got to be a little bit of a geek, saddle geek, to be able to recognize people's lines. But Chaz has his look. Don had his look. Douglas, all of the makers, you don't have to go look at the names. You can just see by the way the skirts and the housings and the fenders and all of that are tied in who built it. And so there is, of course, I think I have a look, and some of that is the result of trial and error and putting them on horses and liking things and not liking things, and you tweak that. You still do, but I would say first and foremost, I've got to look, and that's in the lines, and then it's the flower stamp, and uh, you can recognize somebody by their flower work and their style, and there is a signature, if you will. Some people have a gait to how they walk, all of us, I guess. And so, you have a little of that in your flower work too. There's just a telltale sign. So there's
Yeah.
all of that. And to some degree, it's indefinable. So some people would say they like my look, and other people would say they don't like it. So for some folks, that's just it's just a natural draw to or a natural push away, and you can't really define that.
Hmm.
Um, but I would like to think that there's a lot of cleanliness in my work and refinement, and also affordable. It's not like I want to be known as the cheapest guy, but I don't want to be the most expensive guy either, because I really like the fact that people can afford them, and people that are making a living in them come in here and they order.
Mm-hmm. So probably a big reason, the reason you first ever got on my radar was just social media.
Yeah.
Um, they definitely have my algorithm figured out because it's all just like horses and saddles, right? Like it's like
Right.
custom saddles and like different horses. Um, and so your stuff would pop up. And me, as someone who, to my knowledge, I might have seen one of your saddles and just didn't know someone was riding it, but um, you know, you do have a look. I mean, to me, if I had to use a word, I would say sleek. Like
Mm.
to me, when I look at your saddles, and even if it's like very obviously like I don't know if heavy duty is the right word, but a saddle that's ready to do a day's work
Right.
outside, right? Not a show saddle. That compared to other saddles in that class made by other guys, you are going to have a sleek saddle. And I don't mean like lighter, but it's
Yeah.
almost just the
The
lines
lines.
up
Yeah.
here aerodynamic. And
Yeah.
so
Okay.
for me, I was like, I would see you and then it would get to where I would see something scrolling and I wouldn't even look at the words. I was like, I bet that's one of those Paul VanDyke saddles because they all kind of have the similar look to them,
Yeah. Well, I would
which I think is
that.
cool.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, and I appreciate that. Some of that would be from like a lot of it is really in the skirts. So the overall line and flow of the saddle is in the skirts, and
Mm-hmm.
so I've spent a lot of time putting them on a horse, blocked out, and drawing it on there with the beast, standing there and trying to figure out, is this too deep? Is this too, what are the proportions? And of course, as a custom maker, you can't always build what you think, or you can't always build a 15-inch saddle.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so, if you've got somebody that you're building a 14-inch for or a 17-inch for, there's some challenge there of trying to make it proportionate and still have that look that you want. And so, yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's always, and I like that about the custom making. I like the fact that you have your ideas and you come, or your needs. So you have certain needs that you want this saddle to meet, and I like that part about it, and I find it stimulating, invigorating, and it doesn't. I find it challenging also, and I enjoy that. And there's times where somebody will be like, "Well, I want to do this." I'm like, okay, and be like, "Wow, I would never have even thought about it unless this person, wanted me to do it." So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I like.
Yeah. Um, we've asked the other makers that come on here, is there anything you get a call? Is there anything where they're like, I would like to do such and such? And I know generally as a maker, people try to be pretty accommodating to what folks want, but is there anything you just like really try to steer people away from, or is something that you see that you wish people would just stop asking for that in their saddles for one reason or another?
Yeah, I'll probably think of 5 things as soon as we hang up, but you know, for me, it's the flower stamping thing. Like, it is like, I really don't like to be dictated about flowers. So and this is part of the thing that's unique, is Sheridan is impressionistic with an emphasis on stem work and flow, and a lot of other styles are more about being realistic, like it's an actual poinsettia or an actual rose or an actual this I'm trying to recreate, as opposed to this more impressionistic thing. So,
Mm-hmm.
uh, yeah, I get kind of queasy because not necessarily because you don't want to venture into that world,
Yeah.
but
Wait, so to
because,
be clear, you
yeah,
like if I called you and I was like, I want flower stamping on my saddle, you'd kind of like pause for a second and be like, oh, here we go again?
I would be like, cool. But I would be like, if you said, I really like the Scottish Highland thistle in June. Like a hyper specific
Okay.
flower, because what happens is we have images in our mind and it's hard to fulfill that image. So
Okay.
I might be able to do my best recreation of the Scottish Highland thistle in June, but it might not be what you were thinking it was going to look like. And so therein lies this, kind of a rub because my goal with building a saddle is that if you've got a great horse you're putting it on or a dink you're putting it on, I want that thing to make you smile. Every time you put it on and cinch up, you'll be like, man, I love this saddle. I can't wait to get that. I look at it when I go into saddle house and I like it. And you almost get this little dopamine hit when you look at it because it just makes you feel good, and that's what I want.
Mm-hmm.
That's my goal. So it's hard to make that goal a reality if, you've got an idea of what the wild rose looks like and this is what you really are wanting it to be. And then I let you down. And so it makes me nervous. It just makes me nervous.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense. So, I, well, there's two more things I wanted to touch on.
Yeah.
You kind of share a lot of similar qualities to a lot of makers we've talked to, but I think I don't think I've ever met a single maker who wasn't, lack of a better word, a history buff. Like you obviously display such a reverence for one, the tradition you're a part of, but just kind of everything we've talked about.
Yeah.
You seem like the type of guy who dives in, right?
Oh yeah.
Um and I I'm just curious, like, do you think that's just a that's what makes people become makers? Because this is a very, in terms of trades, right? It's not like you're sitting down and coding at a computer or anything. This is a very steeped in tradition type thing you're doing, working with your
Sure.
hands. You Can you talk about just like what that tradition means to you? Because the first
Oh
thing
yeah.
we sat down and talked for 10 minutes, and the first thing you explained to me was what your lineage was, right? And like that's not
Yeah.
common for people to always do that, but it's clear that you
Yeah.
have quite a reverence there, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. Oh, I could talk at great length about it. It's and I appreciate the question. I appreciate the observation and the being aware of that. So I would say kudos to you for that observation. So I do have a high degree of uh, honor and respect for those guys that I'm in that line of. And we wouldn't be having this discussion today if it wasn't for them and
Mm-hmm.
their lifetime spent pursuing all of these things. And so that is I'm super proud of the fact that this is who I am. I apprenticed under Don. He was with Douglas, and he was with King, and King was, of course, had this whole wide range of, and so to be in that line, and I would like to think that I've done it justice, and that they would be happy to have me as part of the club, if you will. Now, but there's so much in our culture that is where that is just not the case anymore. We don't revere those who came before us and the sacrifices that all of these people have made. There's a lot of arrogance, I think, with that.
Mm,
We didn't, we don't just show up with all of this knowledge and all of this expertise because we're so cool. Uh, People spent lifetimes trying to figure out how a tree works. How to flower stamp and hand sew and how to make this thing look good. They've spent lifetimes, and so I think it's height of arrogance to claim that really you're the guy. And so I would really want people to see and to hear that I'm proud to be in the line of these people, and that I'm not independent of it at all. That I'm very very much in the
hmm
flow and in the stream of that, and that's part of the reason that I enjoy teaching. Is I want this to continue. I want in 30 and 40 years when I'm uh, you know if I live that long, God, Lord willing, I want to be able to say, hey, you know, it's still going. Those things that, that little trick that Butler taught me, or the thing that I learned from King, or uh, the tip that Clint Fay showed me. Those things are living on, and those names and those people's stories are living on too. And so to me it's a big deal, and I want I want to be able to replicate that with other people, and it's just it makes me really happy to see people. They don't have to be young; they can be middle aged or whatever. But to see some of these young guys that are um, 18, 20 years old or whatever, and you're pouring into their life and you're teaching them things, and you see something that they're doing, and it's like, that is awesome. If I died in the next 5 years or
hmm
tomorrow or whatever, a lot of my trade that I have learned and learned from other people, and I'm a conduit, and I'm passing that on to other people, and it grows, it continues, and it doesn't die, and it doesn't go away, and it's I just think it's really special, and it's really really cool. And I would want, at the close of that, I would want people to know that being part of it is really special to me. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean that.
that that's awesome. I think that's a really healthy perspective. Some of the best advice I ever got, uh, and this was before I even got exposed to like the Ray Hunt, and Tom Dorrance type stuff. But I'd been around horses forever, and whatever discipline you're in, they're still, they have old timers and people that got a lot of stuff
Yeah,
figured out. And very early on, I can remember my mother like talking about people that taught her, and she said it's really important to remember that you're just a surfer, you're not the wave,
yeah,
right?
right.
Like you're along for the ride, and if you do your job down the line, someone else will be along for the ride. But you're not the deal. You're not the whole thing.
Yeah,
It's just like this is a craft or a tradition or whatever it is, and it can be a lot of different things. But you're if you keep that perspective of you're like a part of this, and you're privileged to have this thing take you places and get to do stuff, that perspective will get you a lot farther than, wow, look at me,
yeah,
I'm hot stuff, I'm the driving force.
yeah,
Because more often than not, you're not.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And
So
and it doesn't take
that's cool.
long. You have one bad wreck, and it can be all taken away from you. We are
Yeah.
not God,
Yeah.
and it yeah, and I've had wrecks, and you know, um, it's a blessing to live the way I do and to be able to build and do the things that I'm able to do. And it can all be taken away. So, you know, I want to enjoy it. And again,
Yep,
it's important to me to
absolutely.
pass it on. And part of the
Absolutely.
passing it on
Well,
is
so now
I
moving
remember,
forward, oh, go
yeah.
ahead.
Well, I just remember what it was like as that 17, 18-year old kid and, trying to figure it out. And, you know, I'd love to be able to go back and help him. So that's part of what I'm doing too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, so moving forward, we haven't really touched on it, but you've got the classes you teach. What
Yep.
what do you want your business and your life to look like 5, 10 years from now? Like, what are your goals moving forward
Yep.
from here?
Yep. Yep. So the classes, I enjoy them for the reasons we've all just talked about. Don't need to rehash that. And I would see them probably being static as far as in 5 years. It's not like I want to have 12 months a year of that's what I do.
Hmm.
I do it 5 to 6 months maybe, and that's plenty. I'm an introvert by nature, and so being able to have my shop and then do all the other things that I do, it's a good mix. But so I would see that as static, and then still in 5 years or so, really a continuation of life as it is right now would be a goal. I would think some of the other things that I'm working on are some actual learning, for lack of a better word, videos. So I've been working on creating some of that. So that's in the hopper. And so I would see that as another way of uh, replicating who I am and getting that information out to people that are interested in doing it. And so I would see that as possibly being a a leg of the chair that's currently not there. So some of
Mm.
the videos, and then the horse thing, we'll just sort of wait and see what that brings. It's as it is now was a change. That's kind of the word for the years, change, and so it's an accomplishment right now. And so I would say in 5 years, my one daughter's interested in genetics and breeding, and so we're slowly getting some good mares that have got some show earnings and are sure enough solid. Kind of wait and see what they might want to do or not do. I mean, they got to live their own life. But so the horse thing, I would see as maybe tilting a little more that way, just because I've got kids that are kind of interested in that. But so fairly, if I sum it up, 5, 10 years, fairly static, but with a little more emphasis on the education that you can get without having to come here.
Yeah, cool. Well, and for people that are listening to this and didn't know who you were prior to this podcast, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you or look at your work or anything like that? Yeah, want to plug your website and all that?
I think I lost you.
Hey, I looked like I
Yeah.
think my hotel Wi-Fi cut out on me right at the very end there because um I was trying to wrap up,
Yeah.
but yeah, let me make sure we're still recording here. I was gonna say, for people who are finding out about you through this podcast, do you want to plug your website and all that?
Sure. Sure. Yeah. If you go to VanDykeSaddlery.com, you'll be able to see a lot of information there about me and what we do. And then, the Facebook thing is kind of a new deal that I'm constantly learning about. So
Yeah,
uh, those two places are where you're going to find the most information.
cool. Well, You sound like a pretty busy guy, but I appreciate you carving out some time to talk to me today because this has been a fun conversation.
Oh,
I've really,
yeah.
I like talking to saddle makers. You guys are definitely kind of your own breed, but it's fun because, like I said, you guys have a very unique perspective, but I think it's a really valuable one.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Appreciate you reaching out, and I've equally enjoyed it. It's real good.
Yeah,
Thanks.
cool. Well, don't hang up, but I am going to stop recording and then we'll just make
Okay.
sure everything's good.
Yep.